Hello, today we are going to discuss about surface roughness. Now we can see there is two words combining this thing, that is one is surface, another is roughness. So first of all, what is surface? Surface is actually the topmost layer of any object which is actually dividing the object from the surrounding. That is actually known as surface. And second one is roughness. Roughness is actually irregularity. Irregularity of what? Irregularity of that top layer of any object, which actually indicates this thing, that is known as surface roughness. Now we can see that surface roughness, it is a very important thing in metrology. Why it is a very important thing? Because surface metrology having the greater importance in case of specifying the function of a surface. Now a significant proportion of a component failure starts at the surface due to the isolated manufacturing discontinuity or gradual distortion of the surface quality. So it is a very important thing for determining the surface roughness to find out the surface integrity, which actually describe the surface integrity. So in case of manufacturing industry, the inspection of any object or to check the manufacturing of this object, surface roughness must be calculated within the design. Now coming to the surface texture, you can see there is a very specific definition for this surface texture. Now you can see the characteristics quality of an actual surface due to the small departure from its general geometrical form, which occurring at regular or irregular interval tend to form a pattern or texture on the surface. This is actually known as surface roughness. In simple way, surface roughness is actually the deformation which actually occurs on the topmost layer of any object, that is actually known as the surface roughness. It is a geometrical form or texture which may or may not be happen due to different circumstances when any object is being manufactured or being polished or the surface finishing is going on. Okay, now surface texture actually varying accordingly to the manufacturing process in case of production. This is certainly a true case of metal machining. These differences are apparent by visual examination, and it can be felt readily by passing a fingernail over the surface. Now actually the problem in case of measurement of surface texture is basically the geometrical. Although fundamentally the problem is three-dimensional in character, in practice it is conveniently reduced to one or two-dimensional geometry just to solve the problems regarding surface roughness. Okay, now you have to find out which one is the correct plane. For that thing, you have to first understand what are the different orders of surface roughness. So we are going to tell about the first order of surface roughness. Now what is first order of surface roughness? It is actually tells about the irregularities arising out of inaccuracies in the machine tool itself. See the inaccuracies in the machine tool itself. Suppose during machining of any object, if the machine tools become very difficult, or you can say if the machine tools becomes inaccurate, then it create wrong surface, and that also leads to the first order of surface roughness. Now coming to the second order surface roughness. Now in case of second order surface roughness, you can see the irregularities which is caused due to the vibration of any kind, such as chatter marks. Okay, so due to the vibration of the machine tools, these irregularities may occur on the surface of an object, and it actually leads to the second order of surface roughness. Now coming to the third order of surface roughness. Now this actually indicates the irregularities which caused by the machine itself. Irregularities which is caused by the machine itself during the process of manufacturing or finishing. This also includes the feed mark of the cutting tool. Okay, now the last order or fourth order, that is actually irregularities arising from the rupture of the material during the separation of the chip. So it can be differentiated into two different parts. One is the primary texture, another one is the secondary texture. Now what is primary texture? Actually primary texture can be also known as roughness. Okay, so what is primary texture or roughness? Actually this primary texture or roughness in a small wavelength, when the irregularities are being measured, that actually tends to the roughness or primary texture. Okay, this primary texture or irregularities of small wavelength, which actually cause from the direct action of the cutting element on the material or by some other disturbance such as friction, wear or corrosion. Okay, these errors are actually caused due to the tool chatter also. Now it includes irregularities of third and fourth order and consists that of microgeometrical errors also. Okay, now coming to the next part, which is the secondary texture. Now secondary texture, you can see it is the irregularities of the considerable wavelength of a periodic character. Actually in case of the difference between the primary texture and secondary texture also defined as waviness. Okay, secondary texture also defined as waviness. Now the difference between primary texture and secondary texture is the errors which are termed as macrogeometrical errors are which include irregularities of first and second order, are mainly due to the misalignment of center, lack of slight straightness and of guide wires and non-linear feed motion. Actually this secondary texture is collected in a longer area of surface roughness, whereas the surface roughness or roughness, actually the primary texture is considered in a small area of surface irregularities. Okay, you can see in this figure, this is the small portion where roughness or primary texture is being measured, and for the waviness, a long area from where we can measure the waviness or secondary texture. Now we are coming to the different methods of measuring the surface finish. Actually surface inspection or surface finish can be measured by different inspection process. In comparative methods, the surface texture is assessed by observation of the surface, but these methods are not reliable as they can be misleading if comparison is not made with the surface which is produced by the same technique. Now there are different methods which are available. So the first one is the touch inspection. Now in case of touch inspection, you can see in case of touch inspection, one can feel the distance between the peaks of the surface irregularities by touching it with finger on conditions that this distance is greater than 3 mm. Now the feeling of the human is very sensitive. Okay, now due to this highly sensitive human touch, this surface finish can be tested when the fingernail or any metallic edge slides over the surface. Now the surface having maximum depth of roughness of about 0.1 μm can be compared when the sliding speed of the edge is between 3 to 5 cm per second. Basically the surface finish is tested by human touch. That's why there is a certain limitation. What is the limitation? The limitation is the degree of the surface roughness cannot be assessed properly. Also the flow of this surface roughness cannot be detected. This method can simply tell that whether this surface is more rough or less rough. that is smooth or rough surface. Okay, the next one is the visual inspection. The visual inspection, the first one, when you can see that we can inspect the surface roughness by our human touch. The next one is the inspection by our eyes. Now visual inspection in under normal control, or in under normal condition, one can visualize it, and one can easily differentiate between the surface having a roughness or smooth. Now this roughness variation must not be less than 5% due to the fact that brightness of this surface varies proportionally. When a sharp edge is placed over the surface under test, this edge can be by good illumination of 100 to 150 lux identified from the distance of 250 millimeter, an air gap of not less than 0.5 mm, and at a distance between the peaks about 70 mm. Now visual inspection by naked eye is always likely to be misleading, basically just because, particularly when surface having high degree of surface finish are inspected. Okay, now this method is therefore limited to rougher surface and result vary from person to person. So it is a very inaccurate method of inspecting a surface roughness. The next one which we are going to study, that is about the inspection using scratch or scratch inspection. It is a very beautiful inspection. In scratch inspection method, a soft material like lead, babbage or plastic is rubbed over the surface which is being inspected. See, the impression on the soft material is being produced by rubbing that soft material on that surface. By doing it, it carries the impression of the scratch, and by that thing we can easily visualize the surface roughness by the scratches. Okay, the next one is the microscopic inspection. Now in case of microscopic inspection, this method of measuring surface finish perhaps the best method, but suffers due to the limitation that only a small portion of the surface can be inspected one at a time. Just because of microscope, we are using the microscope instrument. The several readings are required to get an average value. Now this method, a master finish subject is placed under the microscope and compared with the surface which is actually under inspection. Now in another method, a straight edge is also placed in the surface to be inspected, and a beam of light is projected at about around 60 degrees to the work. Thus the shadows cast into the surface scratch and magnified it, we can see the surface irregularity very properly. Okay, so this is from the first one to this one. This one is the best method among all of these. The next thing we can see, that is the surface photographs. Now in case of this, magnified photograph of the surface is taken with different types of illumination. Okay, in this case we can use vertical illumination, which actually show the defects or irregularities, and the scratches appears as a dark spot which can be easily understandable under flat portion of the surface appears as bright area. Okay, now the next one, which is the surface roughness measurement process or inspection process, that is the micro interference. In micro interference method, in case of micro interference method of measuring finish, an optical flat is used. Now this optical flat is placed on the surface which is to be inspected and illuminated by a monochromatic source of light. Now by illumination using the monochromatic light, interference bands are studied through a microscope. Now the defects or the scratches in the surface appear as an interference line extending from the dark bands into the bright bands. Then this depth of defects is measured in terms of the fraction of the interference band. So you can easily see the micro interference and the surface photograph. This is particularly almost same. So apart from the other inspection like touch inspection, visual inspection or scratch inspection, these three inspection, the microscopic inspection, surface photographs and micro interference, these three are the most successful way, or you can say the most technically correct way to find out whether there is a surface roughness available or not.